In the spring of 1701, inside the shogun's own castle in Edo, a provincial lord draws a short blade in a hallway lined with cherry trees painted on silkscreens and cuts the face of the shogun's master of ceremonies. He doesn't kill him, he barely wounds him. But it doesn't matter what he intended, because there is exactly one law that governs drawing a blade inside Edo Castle, and it makes no exceptions for reasons. Within hours, the lord who drew that blade is ordered to kill himself before the sun goes down. He does. By nightfall, his entire domain is dissolved, his castle is seized, and roughly 300 samurai who served him lose their lord, their income, their homes, and their place in the world all at once. Most of them scatter into the anonymous, humiliating life of the Ronin, a masterless samurai, one step above a beggar in the eyes of the society they used to belong to. But a smaller group of them, the number the story remembers is 47, do not scatter. They wait.
For nearly 2 years, they do nothing that looks like revenge at all. And then, on a single snowbound night in the depths of winter, they walk into the mansion of the man they blame for their master's death, and by morning, feudal Japan has watched something happen that isn't supposed to be possible anymore. A band of nobodies, acting entirely outside the law, successfully executes a powerful lord in his own home, and then hands themselves over to the authorities without a single one of them trying to run. Here's the part of this story people gloss over first. Why does drawing a sword in a hallway carry a death sentence, while the man on the receiving end of the blade walks away with barely a scratch and no punishment at all? The answer isn't really about the sword. It's about what Edo Castle represents. By 1701, the samurai class has spent almost a century with nothing to fight. The wars that made Japan are 100 years in the past.
What holds the country together now isn't conquest. It's a suffocatingly precise system of rank, protocol, and etiquette, administered from a castle where a single wrong bow can end a career. The man who gets his face cut, an official named Kira, is the shogunate's chief master of ceremonies, the one man whose entire job is teaching provincial lords like Asano, the lord who draws the blade, the correct way to behave in front of the shogun without causing an incident. What actually happened between them in the weeks before the attack, no official record fully explains. Some accounts describe Kira demanding bribes for better instruction and humiliating Asano when none came. Whatever the exact insult was, we know the outcome. A proud provincial lord, trained his whole life to swallow exactly this kind of humiliation, didn't swallow it. And the punishment that follows isn't really about justice for a minor wound. It's about the fact that violence, any violence, inside that specific building threatens the entire fragile peace the shogunate has spent a century building. Asano has to die immediately, publicly, and by his own hand, precisely because the crime looks so small. A system that survives on the appearance of perfect order cannot be seen hesitating over an exception. So the domain is dissolved, the castle handed over, and roughly 300 samurai are cut loose overnight, with no lord, no stipend, and by the code they live under, technically no honor left either. Kira, the man they blame, receives no punishment whatsoever. He keeps his rank, his mansion, his life. And this is where most of those 300 men make the only reasonable choice available to them. They take other positions where they can find them, or they vanish into poverty, and they let it go. Because the law has spoken, and arguing with the law a second time only invites a second death sentence, this time with no ceremony attached.
A core group, led by a retainer named Oishi Kuranosuke, decide they will not let it go. But here's the move that makes this story worth telling instead of just another failed uprising. They don't act. For almost 2 years, Oishi does something that looks, to every observer, including the shogunate's own spies, like a man falling apart. He leaves his family. He moves to Kyoto. He drinks in public, visits brothels, picks fights, and by every outward account, simply dissolves into disgrace, the exact fate everyone expects a masterless samurai to suffer. Some later accounts even describe him being spat on in the street by strangers who assume he's simply given up on his lord's memory entirely. It works. Kira's household, understandably nervous about revenge in the months right after the incident, gradually stands down its guard as the months pass, and the disgraced Ronin's leader seems to confirm there's nothing left to fear. That is the entire strategy in one sentence. Convince the target you have already lost, for as long as it takes for that belief to stop costing you anything to maintain. While Oishi performs his very public collapse, the rest of the plan moves in almost total secrecy. Loyal Ronin scattered across the country slowly regroup, some working menial jobs to stay fed and unnoticed, others quietly mapping the layout of Kira's Edo mansion, its guard rotations, the layout of its gates. Weapons and armor are smuggled into Edo in small, unremarkable pieces over months, because a large weapon shipment is exactly the kind of thing that draws suspicion, while 100 small, unremarkable deliveries draw none. Every part of this operation is built around the same single insight. The shogunate's entire surveillance apparatus is built to catch obvious threats, angry men, armed gatherings, open plotting. It is not built to catch patience. On the night of the 14th day of the 12th month, in the middle of a snowstorm, roughly 47 of them assemble outside Kira's mansion in Edo. The weather isn't incidental to the plan, it's part of it. Heavy snow muffles sound, keeps the streets empty, and slows any response from nearby samurai households who might otherwise come running at the noise of a raid. They split into two groups and strike both gates of the compound at once, so the household's defenders can't consolidate into a single point. Inside, the fighting is fast, and by most accounts remarkably one-sided. Not because Kira's household guards are weak, but because the Ronin have spent months learning exactly where every guard would be standing and exactly how many of them there were, while the defenders are simply reacting to an attack they'd stopped believing would ever come. They find Kira hiding, according to several accounts, in an outbuilding used for storing charcoal, dragged out in his nightclothes with no weapon and no guard left standing near him. Oishi is said to have given him the chance to end his own life with dignity, the same choice their lord had been forced into 2 years earlier, and when Kira couldn't or wouldn't, they killed him and took his head. Then, and this is the detail that turns this from a massacre into something the entire country would still be discussing 3 centuries later, they didn't scatter into the night to save themselves. They walked, in formation, through the streets of Edo in broad daylight to the grave of their dead lord at a temple called sengaku-ji, and laid Kira's head on the grave as proof the debt had been settled. Then, every single one of them stayed exactly where they were and waited to be arrested. That decision is the whole reason this story survived. A band of masterless men murdering a lord in the night is a crime story. A band of masterless men murdering a lord and then publicly surrendering, refusing to flee, refusing to hide, insisting the shogunate try them for it, turns it into something the entire samurai class recognized as an act of loyalty carried out with total integrity, even while breaking the law to do it. It put the shogunate in an impossible position of its own. Punish them fully as common murderers and risk being seen as an institution with no respect left for the very code of loyalty its whole class was built on, or pardon them outright and openly admit that private revenge could override the law whenever a grievance felt righteous enough. The compromise the shogunate settled on was itself an admission of how much this act had shaken the system. The 46 men in custody, one, a young courier sent ahead to Akko with the news, is spared the fate of the others, are not executed as common criminals in public. They are ordered to commit seppuku, the death reserved for men of honor, allowed to die by their own hand, exactly the way their lord had 2 years before. Sengaku-ji still stands in Tokyo today, and the graves of the Ronin are still there, beside their lords, visited and tended more than 300 years later. Incense burning at markers for men the law of their own time was forced to execute and honor in the very same breath. A handful of men with no lord, no army, and no legal path to justice brought down one of the most protected men in Edo, not with strength, but by convincing an entire government surveillance system that they had already given up. That is a whole story of its own.